The senator from Oklahoma.
And I will not object if the senator would make this change to the proposed agreement, that the only amendments in order other than the committee reported substitute be these three: the Harkin-Enzi substitute amendment, which is fully offset and has been agreed to.
That again?
The Harkin-Enzi substitute amendment, which is fully offset and has been agreed to by both managers, which will be agreed to as original text for the purposes of further amendment. The Harkin-Enzi technical amendment and the Tester amendment are in regards to small farms.
Does the leader so modify his request?
It's my understanding then my good friend from Oklahoma would have no amendment.
I wouldn't need an amendment because the bill would already be offset.
Well, what I say to my friend, I think that this is something that I would like to take a little time, and not a lot of time, but a little bit of time, talk to my friend, Senator Durbin, Harkin, and Enzi, and see if there's something we can do to move this down the ball field. And if not, we'll come back and you and I can be here again talking about this.
All right.
So, Mr. President, in light of my friend's request to modify my unanimous consent request and my inability to intelligently respond to it, because this is something I had not anticipated, I will be happy to withdraw my request, and I will renew it at a later time if I can come to something that's more appropriate that I think would...
The Majority Leader. I'd ask unanimous consent to be recognized for 15 minutes.
No. First, the request is withdrawn, and the senator is recognized.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, I shall not object. I wonder if the senator would modify his request so that I might be recognized following his presentation.
I have no problem modifying my request in that regard.
Without objection.
Mr. President, there's nobody in this country that doesn't want our food to be safe. There's no question. We all rely on the intent that the vast majority of food is safe in this country. And there's no question we have some problems with food safety. But the biggest problem we have is in fixing the symptoms of a problem rather than the problem itself. And I hope America will pay attention to this. Ask yourself why it took the Food and Drug Administration 10 years to give us an egg safety standard, and that no oversight committee of either the House or the Congress through the previous 10 years held that oversight hearing to say, why is it taking 10 years to get an egg safety standard? Matter of fact, the egg safety standard came out 10 days afterwards, coincidentally, to the salmonella infection that have recently seen. Now, as a practicing physician who has treated Shigella, Salmonella, Yersinia pestis, Campylobacter, and Listeria monocytogenes, which are all very infectious gastroenteritis bacterial diseases that can come from food, I want it to be safe. But what I want more than that is the organization that's supposed to keep it safe to do its job. And the problem with this bill, besides it not being paid for, is it doesn't fix the real problem. The American public should know, if you go to the grocery store anywhere in this country and buy a pepperoni pizza, the FDA is responsible for the food safety. But if you buy a cheese pizza, it's the USDA. How does that make any sense to anybody in America? And what happened on the farms in Iowa as far as eggs is the USDA knew there was a problem. But they didn't tell the FDA, because the FDA is only responsible for the egg once it gets out of the chicken. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? The egg, once it came out and was shipped, was then the responsibility of the FDA. This bill doesn't address any of those problems. So as we look to solve a very critical and real problem, and I acknowledge Senator Durbin's work on this, I acknowledge our chairman and ranking member, I had a staff member at every meeting that they had raising these same objections. We now have a bill that's going to cost the American public $1.5 billion over the next 5 years that doesn't fix the real problem. And the real problem is the lack of focus of the agencies to do their job. And it does not eliminate the crossover and lack of consistency. You know, if you buy red meat in the store, you only have to trust one agency. But if you buy an egg, you have to trust two. If you buy salad or lettuce, you have to trust two. They're not talking to one another. And there's nothing in this bill that makes them do that. What we have done is we've created a lot of new regulations with a lot of money without solving the real problem. And the only way we get to the real problem is to have the FDA up here once a week for the next 4 weeks and the USDA once a week for the next 4 weeks talking about these critical crossover issues. And in the bill, it actually states in the bill, nothing in this act or an amendment made by this act shall be construed to alter the jurisdiction between the Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of Health and Human Services. In other words, there's a prohibition to alter the responsibilities so that we might have safe food. In other words, to hold one agency accountable rather than two so one can point the finger at the other. And we had a House hearing today on the egg recall. And the fact is, that's what happened. USDA knew there were problems, but the FDA didn't know there were problems until after somebody got sick. So we create a high level of additional regulation, a high level of various inspections, and I'm not against the inspections. I eat salad like the rest of us. I know sometimes I'm not accused of being human, but the fact is I consume the same food everybody else does. I don't want to get sick from it. But we can't continue to pass bills that pile on regulations that cost the American people $1.5 billion that don't fix the real problem. And that's the problem. My objection is it's not paid for, and I'll hear the objection, well, it's an authorizing bill. Oh, really? It's just an authorizing bill. So that means there's not any money going to be spent? Well, if there's not any money going to be spent, then we really aren't passing the bill to do what we want it to do. Because if we say we're not responsible for spending another $1.5 billion, then there's no problem. It's not spending any money. And if it's not spending money, it's not going to do anything. But if it is spending money, we ought to decrease the priority somewhere else within the waste of the USDA, which there's billions, and within the FDA, which has tons of property they're not using, which could pay for this bill easily. We ought to eliminate the things that aren't working. So I want our food to be safe. As a practicing physician, I know the public health aspects of this bill. But I refuse to go forward when we continue to make the same mistakes that has given us a $1.4 trillion deficit, that has given us lack of control and lack of oversight of the bureaucracies. And the biggest thing is that we're not holding anybody accountable with this. Because we'll pass this, and then the next time there's a food problem in terms of contaminated food, we'll pass something else. And in between time, there won't be the first oversight hearing to say, what did we do? Did it work? Show us the results at work. Is it efficient? Is it effective? Did it improve the safety of the food? We won't do that. We'll just react and pass another bill. Well, I'm through passing bills that don't solve the real problem. And I'm through spending the next 2 generations' money when we can't make the priority choices. And the fact that we refuse to say we're going to eliminate something that's very low priority to be able to have a food safety bill, then that tells the American people that we're not up to the task of getting us out of the problems that we're in. I know everybody in this body wants safe food. Even me. And I'm not tired of taking the hits for holding up this bill. Because We can't be perfect on food. We can be a whole lot better. This bill can solve some of the problems, but it's not complete. And it hadn't looked at the levels that it needs to look to straighten out the bureaucracy on food safety. It has not eliminated the overlap. And nobody with any common sense said you'll have pizzas in the grocery store, one controlled by the USDA and one controlled by the FDA. It's clueless. It doesn't fit. The reason the one that doesn't have any meat on it is controlled by the FDA because it has a milk product on it. It has cheese. But the one that has pepperoni on it has cheese too. So how do we get there? Where are we going to establish responsibility and accountability to the agencies that are responsible for food safety? So I look forward to working with the majority leader. I'll take a less than perfect bill anytime, but I won't take a bill that isn't paid for and doesn't come out of the hides of our children and grandchildren. With that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from North Dakota.